What is going on, Raiders? Soda Dragon here, and today we are reviewing and ranking all the legendaries in the Sacred Order. Alright guys, so the way I rank legendaries is that I put more weight and emphasis on legendaries that you can use in more areas of the game versus legendaries that have very niche or narrow usages. Alright guys, starting off with Roshcard. He's old school, you used to see him everywhere until we started to get all these buff strippers. Now you don't see him used as often, but heads up, he's still a really good champ. Let's talk about his skills. Let's start with Roshcard's A1 Rebuke. Attacks one enemy. Has a 50% chance of removing one random buff from the target. Damage based on attack. So firstly, you cannot book this chance any higher. That is the chance to remove a buff. So it's just going to stay at 50%. And even as is, it's not bad. You can't really count on it at half chance to proc, but it's still not bad. But the weird thing is, this damage of this attack is based on the attack stat. Now for an HP champ, that is really weird, especially considering when we're going to get to his A2, that damage is based on HP, which makes more sense. So chances are, if you're building out your Roshcard, you're not going to build him with attack, so his A1 is not going to hit that hard. It's okay because it still has good utility with that 50% chance to remove a buff. On to Roshcard's A2, Sanction. Attacks one enemy. Places a block active skills debuff and a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. These debuffs cannot be resisted. Damage based on HP. So this is on a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. This A2 is excellent. The idea that you have an irresistible block buffs and an irresistible block active skills, that is amazing. Yes, it's single target, but it's irresistible. That means if the opponent does not have block debuffs up, it doesn't matter what their resistance is. 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, it doesn't matter. Roshcard is coming at you and he is locking you out of your skills. And if you get the Master Hexer Mastery, potentially Roshcard is locking you out for 3 turns of using your skills and getting any buffs. Okay, so this is excellent A2. And remember, when you're fighting him as well, if you see him in the arena, watch out, okay? He can lock you out of your skills and he can turn whoever you reviver useless, okay? When he's locking you out. So absolutely excellent A2. On to Roshcard's A3, what he is known for, Zone of Protection. Places a block damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. So this is on a 6-turn cooldown, bookable to a 4-turn cooldown. So this used to be the bee's knees. This used to be one of the best buffs in the game. Once again, before we got all these buff strippers. Okay, so nowadays this is not as useful, at least in PvP. Now in PvE, this is still really useful. So the thing is, Roshcard can still be really useful. The idea that for 2 turns, normal enemies, unless they have a buff stripper, can't do any damage to you. That gives you time to heal, that gives you time to get your cooldowns reduced. It's great, okay? So just because in PvP you see all these Cereses and different people that strip buffs, in PvE, Roshcard is still really useful, and this is still a really strong buff. Right? Because in PvE, there's not a ton of buff strippers around. There's not Cereses hanging around in every corner. Okay? So this is still a really good skill. Alright, on to Roshcard's Aura. Increases ally HP in all battles by 33%. Great Aura. Very useful. So how would I rate Roshcard? Well, if it was a few years ago, he would be S tier. He was really that OP with his block damage for 2 turns. He was insane. Now, with all the buff strippers, Roshcard gets a solid B. Okay? But he is still really good. he can still help you out in a ton of PvE content. That block damage is great. And like I said, there's not like buff strippers hanging around on every corner. So you're gonna find a lot of utility in PvE with that block damage. Plus that single target irresistible block active skills debuff. Okay. Plus, if you're running clan boss team, you can make Roshcard work in an unkillable team. So if you guys don't know, I'm not sure how you wouldn't, but the best way to do clan boss is with an unkillable team. That is absolutely the most efficient way to do clan boss. And if you don't have a few man eaters, just hanging around in your vault, well, use Roshcard. He can help you out. You can build an unkillable team with block damage champs like Roshcard and Warcaster, etc. So you do have to worry about stuns and the stun target when you do work an unkillable without man-eater, but it can still work. People have done it. So you can use Roshcard on your unkillable clan boss teams, and clan boss is the best rewards in this game, bar none. Okay, so if you guys don't take clan boss seriously, you should. You get the absolute best rewards out of any area of this game, and Roshcard can help you with that unkillable. So Roshcard gets a solid B. Great champ. Moving on to Astralon. He was a fusion champ, and he does not disappoint. Let's start with Astralon's A1, Hellbinder. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Has a 30% chance, bookable to 50, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Counter-Slicks will team up and join the attack if they are on the same team. Counter-Slicks will use their default skill. Counter-Slicks will not team up on this attack if the skill is used when counterattacking or when teaming up to attack with another champion. Damage based on attack. So first thing to note is that decreased defense, the chance is for the attack, it's not per hit. So at most you have a 50% chance per this attack to put that decreased defense up, which is still pretty good. And all of Astralon's damage multipliers are good, including this A1. But man, when he is with Counter-Slicks, it is such a good tandem. You can't really say that about all the couples in this game, but they are a really, really good couple. So if you have them both, absolutely use them together. When Astralon does his A1, she'll do hers too. It's just a ton of damage. So this is a good A1. I wish it would have been 50% chance per hit on his A1 to apply that decreased defense, but it is 50% per attack for that decreased defense. But still, if you have Counter-Slicks and you team up, man, you can do some damage even on that A1. On to Astralon's A2, Divine Imminence. Attacks one enemy. Will ignore increased defense, strengthen, and allied protection buffs. Revives a random ally with 40% HP and places a shield buff on them, equal to 20% of their max HP for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. Also places a shield buff on this champion equal to 20% of their max HP for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. Damage based on attack. So this is a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. This attack is nuts. It hits really hard. It has an awesome animation, like this crazy dive bomb animation. So damage multipliers are really strong, and it revives somebody on your team if this kills somebody. So this is just a great A2, and this is what gives Astralon a lot of utility. Astralon is a reviver. That's just crazy. All right, this attack champ, and he hits hard. He is an attack champ, but he can actually revive too. So his kit just has so much utility, and this is one of the reasons why. He's the only champ that I know of at this point that can ignore ally protection. Okay, so Mountain King, all the others, they don't ignore ally protection, but he can, okay, with this hit. So it hits super hard. Now, can he hit through block damage? No. Can he hit through shields? No. But he can ignore a lot of things, including one of the more common ones, which is that ally protection. So really, really good A2. On to Astralon's A3, Light of Sanctity. Removes all buffs from targets under Veil or Perfect Veil buffs, then places a 25% weaken debuff on enemies who have Veil or Perfect Veil buffs removed, then attacks all enemies. Also has a 75% chance, bookable to 100, of placing a stun debuff on all enemies for 1 turn, damage based on attack. So this is on a 5-turn cooldown, bookable to 4. Just note here that the buffs are only removed if they have a Veil on. So whether it's Veil or Perfect Veil, only in that situation will Astralon then, with this skill, remove all of their buffs. So that means if they have a lot of buffs up but they don't have Veil on, then this will not remove their buffs. Okay, so this only removes their buffs if they have Veil or Perfect Veil in addition to their other buffs. But you can still place the stun. Okay, so whatever buffs they have up or no buffs, you can still place that stun and it still does damage. Okay, and also note here that the buff removal is resistible. That means those really tanky duchesses with tons of resist, they might be able to resist the buff removal. Now, a lot of other champs probably won't, but your really tanky ones, yes, they will be able to resist Astralon's buff removal. But in any case, this is such a good A3. So along with reviving and doing tons of damage and stunning, Astralon can also remove buffs. He's also a buff stripper. Is there anything this guy can't do? I don't think so. On to Astralon's passive, Emissary. Fills this champion's turn meter by 3% every time an ally is hit. Decreases incoming damage by 25% if the attacker's attack is lower than this champion's. So note here, anytime an ally is hit, Astralon gets 3% turn meter. And notice on this passive, there is no cooldown. Some passives, there are cooldowns. There is none on this. Every time that your allies are getting hit, he's getting turn meter. So the first part of this is excellent. Okay, Astralon's going to be cycling his turns a lot faster because of this. Now, this is no excuse to build Astralon low speed. Okay, you still need to build the vast majority of your champions with speed, and Astralon is no exception. But the second part of this, notice that if someone's attack is lower than Astralon's, that he will reduce that damage. So this could be your Sir Nyx. This could be a lot of those really defense heavy champs that also hit hard. So he is going to be taking reduced damage from them. Now, does this matter in the long run? Probably not. If Ignatius nukes Astralon will probably die. This guy is still more of a glass cannon, even with this passive. But it's still nice to have. You probably won't notice it. This is one of the champs where you got to keep him alive, or just have him go first. Okay, if he goes first and stuns, nukes, whatever you want, he can do a lot. But this guy can't really take that much damage, even with this passive. So how would I rate Astralon? By himself, he is an A. Excellent. He is just the definition of an attack champion and more. He hits super hard. When you see him in the arena, you're scared, like, oh my gosh, because he hits so hard. Plus, he has AoE CC abilities, like crowd control abilities, right? Plus, he has AoE buff removal. Plus, he can revive. Plus, he can, ignore ally protection, all this stuff. He does so much, and there's just so much in his kit as far as utility. And he hits hard, okay? He's not just one of those utility attack champs that doesn't really hit hard, all right? You're scared when you see him in the arena. Man, is he gonna do the A2 to me and just, like dive bomb me? So he is a really good champ, but when you pair him with Countess Lix, he is S tier. They are such a good couple, okay? And man, it is just, if you don't go before them in the arena, they got you. She'll lock you out of your skills, and Astralon will just nuke the heck out of you, okay? So they are an absolutely great pair. So Astralon by himself in A. If you have Countess Lix, he is S tier. If you were lucky enough to fuse this guy, he was one of the best fusions lately, okay? He is great, and definitely put him to use. There's just so much he can do. The only thing he can't is take a hit, all right? So he's kind of frail, but man, his damage output and utility, it's up there. Okay, so he is a solid A by himself, S tier with Countess Licks. All right, guys, next we got Errol, an old school legacy champ that did get buffed by Plarium, but he needs to be buffed again. Let's start with Errol's A1, Blazing Sword. Attacks one enemy. Has an extra 30% chance of inflicting a critical hit. Damage based on attack. So this, the damage multipliers on this are actually pretty good, and that's pretty much across the board with Errol. And he also has, in all of his skills, this extra 30% chance to inflict a critical hit. So what does this mean when you're building him? Well, now you don't have to build him with as much crit rate. So you can focus on attack or crit damage. So ideally, in theory, you can make him hit harder. And also notice here, booked out, you can get 25% more damage. So this is a pretty hard-hitting A1. On to Errol's A2, Helmbreaker. Attacks one enemy 3 times. Has an extra 30% chance of inflicting a critical hit. Each hit has a 50% chance to ignore defense. Damage based on attack. So this is on a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. And the damage multipliers are pretty good on this. Plus, he has a 50% chance per hit to ignore 50% of defense. So this is a pretty hard-hitting skill, but notice, as with all of Errol's skills, they're all single target. And this is purely damage-based as well. There's not too much utility in this skill. It's just basically damage. But it is a hard hitter, especially if all 3 hits proc that ignore defense. And it's going to hit really hard. On to Errol's A3, Negation. Steals all buffs from a target enemy, then attacks the target. Has an extra 30% chance of inflicting a critical hit. Damage based on attack. So this is on a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. Plus with books, you can increase the damage of this by 45%. Now this already has really good damage multipliers. So plus 45%, this is going to hit so hard. Plus, before he hits, what does he do? Steals all your buffs. So all your shields, block damage, ally protection, strengthen, whatever it is, steals all your buffs. So this is a skill that you're scared of him using when you're facing him in the arena. Like, who's he going to use negation on? Because that person's going to die, okay? So this is just clearly Errol's best skill. And definitely, if you have him, you want to cycle the skill as much as possible. But once again, as with all of Errol's skills, this is single target. So it has a lot of utility when you can use it for that single target, but when it's on cooldown, the rest of Errol's kit doesn't really bring that much to the table besides single target damage. On to Errol's Aura. Increase ally attack in dungeons by 35%. So not the most useful aura for dungeons. Chances are you won't be using this aura that much. So how would I rate Errol? I would give him a C. Just contrast Errol and his kit with the last champion that we just talked about, Astralon. And if you contrast the two, it's like, are we talking about a legendary versus a rare? So you see the simplicity, and I mean that negatively, unfortunately, in Errol's kit. Only single target damage, and only one of his skills is really good. The rest of them just are not that good. He just does not bring enough to the table in terms of utility and even damage, because all his skills are single target. Okay, so he definitely needs some sort of buff, even if they made his A3 irresistible. Okay, so he just removes all buffs and that can't be resisted. He doesn't need accuracy. He probably still needs some sort of extra utility on top of the rest of his skill set. So he definitely needs a buff. Can he hit hard? Oh yes. Yeah, he can. He can hit really hard. But what he does share with Astralon is he really can't take a hit either. So you have a single target damage dealer that really has only one useful skill, and once that's used up, then this guy's going down. Anybody that hits him, he's going down. So he doesn't bring that much to the table. So I would give Errol a C. I really want to like the guy. He is a legacy champ, and you know there's a special place in my heart for all the legacy champs. But he needs a buff because people need a reason to bring him out of the vault, and I hope Plarium does that in the future. Next up, we got another hard-hitting legacy champ, Abbess. You know, guys, I always thought she had like a weird stare. Is it just me? Anyways, let's start with Abbess's A1, Arrow of Rebuke. Attacks one enemy. Removes one random debuff from this champion and places it on the target. Damage based on attack. So all of Abbess's skills, they have very interesting damage multipliers. So she can do damage, but note here that it's only one debuff from Abbess. So this isn't like Lysandra, who with one skill, her A1 can transfer all her debuffs to a target. So if she has 10 debuffs, the max, she can transfer all of them. Unfortunately, Abbess can only transfer one, but Abbess does a ton more damage than Lysandra. Moving on to Abbess's A2, Mass Impalement. Attacks all enemies. Has a 75% chance, bookable to 100, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. So this is on a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. So this is a really good skill. So you have an AoE, not only attack, but decreased defense, the strong version, on a 3-turn cooldown. So very good A2. On to Abbess's A3, Divine Wrath. Attacks all enemies. Damage inflicted is proportional to either this champion's attack or the target's defense or attack stat, whichever is highest. Deals an extra 30% crit damage if the target's attack is highest. Ignores 30% of the target's defense if the target's defense is highest. So this is on a 6-turn cooldown, bookable to 4. Now this skill does hit reasonably hard, but it seems overly complicated. So that's a problem with this. For how complicated this skill is, you would think it would just hit so hard. And it hits pretty hard, but you'll see no one uses Abbess as their go-to nuker. Okay, so all the complications with this A3, most people would just rather use someone like Ethos. Okay, simple. Trunda, simple, just damage, simple. Okay, so we're not going off our attack or their attack or blah, blah, blah. Simple. Okay, so this is one of those skills that needs to be reworked. Just make it simple based on her attack and increase the damage multipliers or add some sort of debuff with it. But as the skill stands, it's sort of complicated, plus it doesn't hit as hard as it should. On to Abbess's Aura. Increases ally attack and faction crypts by 34%. Now you guys know I don't like auras and faction crypts, they're way too limiting, plus the attack aura, chances are you won't be using it that much, so not a great aura. Alright guys, how would I rate Abbess? I would give her a B. She is a good attack champion, and her damage multipliers, at least for her A1 and her A2, are good. It's the A3 that's a little weird. You're going to find sometimes people it should hit really hard on, it doesn't, and then other people you just wipe the floor with them. So it's very inconsistent insofar as predicting how much damage it's going to do. So I think the A3 needs to be reworked to do more consistent damage and maybe even add a debuff to it like her A2 with the defense down. So she is a good champion to have. She does hit hard. If you put the best gear on her, yes, she will hit crazy hard. But in my opinion, the best attack champions shouldn't require insane gear. Okay, and once again, this is why no one uses Abbess as their go-to nuker. That A3, it's just too unpredictable. And then the A2 just doesn't hit hard enough. Okay, so she's a good attack champion, but she's not top tier. So I'm gonna give Abbess a B. All right guys, on to Martyr, the warrior nun of Raid. Let's start with Martyr's A1 Rush. Attacks one enemy. Has a 45% chance, bookable to 75%, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on defense. So this is a single target damage dealing A1, but it hits hard. Damage multipliers are really strong in this. So when Martyr either hits you with this A1 or you hit her and she counterattacks with this A1, it hits really hard. Plus, you have the chance, 75%, of decreased defense. So this is a really good, hard-hitting A1. On to Martyr's A2, Bastion of Faith. Places a 60% increased defense buff and a counterattack buff on all allies for 2 turns. So notice here, this is on a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. If you have the mastery called Lasting Gifts, you can potentially have 100% uptime on your counterattack and defense up, which is kind of cool. And notice how many books this takes. 1. So this is one of the old school champs where once you got Martyr, you hoped, you prayed that you only needed to put 1 book into her, that your 1 book landed on her A2. So nowadays, especially in PvP, those second tanky buff-based teams, they're a little bit harder to build, okay? Because their buffs can get stripped, okay? So you have people like Sathalia, Madame Ceres, that do AoE buff stripping, right? Plus you have single target buff strippers. So it's a lot more difficult to hide behind buffs nowadays because of how many people can strip buffs, either AoE or single target. So this is one of the reasons why buff-based teams aren't as prevalent as they used to be. Really tanky, heavy resistance buff-based teams aren't as prevalent. Can you still build them? Sure, absolutely. But your player power is gonna have to be pretty high. So I feel like most people just find it easier, especially in PvP, to run a go first team. To run a fast, nuking go first team versus a slow, second, tanky, buff-based team. But in any case, in PvP, it's harder nowadays to hide behind buffs. And this goes for counterattack, this goes for Roshcard's block damage. Any slower buff-based team, they're harder to build. Can you do it? Yes, you can. But that being said, for PvP, in PvE, this is still S tier. Counterattack is still S tier for PvE. So this is an absolutely great skill for PvE. So for PvE, all the counterattackers, they're overpowered. Okay, they're still really, really good for PvE content. Where they have dropped off is the PvP. So I know you guys might be thinking, what are you talking about? I see people like Valkyrie all the time in upper gold and platinum. So what are you talking about? Counterattack is kind of out of the meta. Guys, if you see Valkyrie in upper gold and platinum, it is not for her counterattack. It is not for her A2. It's actually for her other skills, in particular this passive, okay? Basically, when someone receives a buff, and especially someone like Sifi is buffing the whole team like crazy, what Valkyrie will do is she will suppress their turn meters. So she's reducing their turn meters every time they receive a buff. So it allows her and your team to cut in on those really fast teams. That is why people use her, for her passive primarily. And her A1 is good as well. But literally the last reason they use her is her counterattack and shield. Okay, so once again, if you see Valkyrie in Platinum, don't think it's because of counterattack. It's because they want to cut in on those go first teams, and Valkyrie's passive helps them do it. Now that we've cleared that up, back to Martyr and her A3. Suppression. Attacks all enemies. Places a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. Places a provoke debuff for 1 turn. Damage based on defense. So this is on a 6-turn cooldown, bookable to 4. This is a really hard-hitting skill, really good skill. Unfortunately, if you're using Martyr on auto, she will actually use this skill first. So she's provoking people, but she doesn't have her counterattack up to hit them back. So I definitely recommend, if you're using her on manual, it's probably best to get that counterattack up first before putting up those provokes. But as far as damage, all of her skills do really strong damage. She is a hard-hitting defense champ, and this AoE skill is no exception. Now, with the decreased attack, I would say be careful if you plan to use her in Clan Boss and you have a non-unkillable team. So her 2-turn decreased attack is not enough for a non-unkillable team. You need 100% uptime on that decreased attack, and Martyr can't give it to you. Martyr seems like the all-in-one package, but one thing she doesn't have is 100% uptime on decreased attack, and that is one of the things you need to sustain the fight, okay? So ideally, you need someone with decreased attack on their A1 skill. Because let's say, you're using Martyr and you use her A3, and then it's resisted by the boss. Then you have 4 rounds which you don't have decreased attack instead of just 2. So you definitely need someone with a decreased attack on their A1. Okay, so Martyr, she does a ton. She's really good for Clan Boss, really good for PvE, but that decreased attack, you need it on the A1 for the Clan Boss. So Martyr is gonna need to be supplemented with somebody else for Clan Boss. And lastly, onto Martyr's aura. Increase ally defense in all battles by 33%. Great aura. You will use this a lot. So excellent aura. So guys, how would I rate Martyr? She is a straight up solid A. She used to be one of the absolute best in the game, and she is still one of the absolute best in the game. She's really good. Now, she did used to be, I would say, S tier before we got all these buff strippers, and you would see her in the arena all the time. And as I mentioned, she's sort of fallen out of favor in the arena, in the speed meta with her buffs and a little bit slower base speed. So you're not going to see her as much in upper tier arena. But still, PvE, completely overpowered. She can push you through so much PvE, dungeon, doom tower, whatever it is, PvE content. She will make it a walk in the park. And she's so tough and she hits so hard. She is great. So she continues to endure and be one of the best champs in the game. So you are so lucky if you pull her. Next, we got the love master himself, Cupidus. So Cupidus is actually one of the couples in this game, and his partner is in the same faction. So we'll get to her later. Let's start with Cupidus's A1, Heartbreaker. Attacks all enemies. Damage increases by 15% if the target has any debuffs. Damage based on attack. So this skill actually hits pretty hard for an A1. And it is an AoE. That means if you want to make him a crowd control Cupidus, you can put a stun set on him, a sleep set, a provoke set. So really good A1. On to Cupidus's A2, Flames of Passion. Attacks 3 times at random. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. Now this chance can be increased to 75% when booked. So it's on a 4-turn cooldown, and this cannot be reduced. So this skill does hit really hard, but unfortunately it's 3 times at random. So if you're going against a crowd of people, it might hit who you want it to hit and it might not. So that's the drawback of this skill. But it does hit pretty hard and you have that HP burn along with it. So it's a good A2. Would have been better with just a straight up AoE A2. On to Cupidus's A3, Flame Out. Places a 50% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns, then attacks 1 enemy. Has a 50% chance of placing a HP burn debuff on all enemies for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. This debuff cannot be resisted. Damage based on attack. So this 50% chance of placing an HP burn if an enemy is killed that cannot be increased any further, the chance of placing that. Nevertheless, you'll see it a lot. Now this attack hits really, really hard. It's really cool that Cupidus not only has his AoE skill, which is hard hitting on his A1, but he has his A3 and it's single target, but it hits super hard. And if you kill somebody, and if you build him right, you'll kill a lot of people with his A3. You get HP burn on people, and that is irresistible. So this is a really powerful A3. I think sometimes people build Cupidus for more of the crowd control aspect because of his A1, and they might not put enough attack or crit rate or crit damage on him to really get the benefit out of his A3. But if you build him right, his A3, it can one-shot just so many people in this game, all right? So definitely building him for attack is not a waste. Building him for damage is not a waste. He can absolutely smack people with his A3. On to Cupidus' passive, Punishing Partner. Attacks inflict 25% more damage to targets under debuffs. Only available when Venus is on the same team. So actually when you put them on the same team, they make a really good pair. So you see the increased damage from Cupidus. He already has the potential to do really good damage, depending on how you build him. Plus Venus, which we'll get to in a second, she becomes a buff stripper. It's crazy. She becomes like a Ceres, or a Cythalia. She becomes a buff stripper when they're both on the same team. So they have an excellent couple pairing ability. On to Cupidus' aura. Increases ally attack in all battles by 33%. So in all battles good, all allies good. It's just the attack increase, you probably won't be using it that much. All right guys, how would I rate Cupidus? So I would say he is a B- without Venus. Okay, so he is a good champion. He is capable of great damage numbers. He is versatile because of his A1 being an AoE. You can build him for damage, or you can build him for crowd control if you put that stun set or provoke set on him. So there's a lot of different ways you can build him. Plus he has debuffs, okay, which is pretty cool. So he is definitely a good champion. Now, once again, without Venus, I would rate him a B-. With Venus, he's a B+. Okay, so why is he not an A? Because that couple pairing doesn't give him any increased utility. All it gives him is a boost in damage, which is great, which is a lot, but still, it's not like the upgrade Venus gets, or she becomes like a Madame Ceres. She becomes a buff stripper. So he doesn't get any big increase like that. So she definitely gets the better end of the couple pairing. But Cupidus is a very good champion, especially PvE. Okay, so you can build him for damage, you can build him for crowd control, good multipliers. So he's definitely a good champ. Without Venus, B-. With Venus, B+. Have you guys seen the Christmas Chronicles on Netflix? If you have, you know what I'm talking about. Every time I look at Sir Nick, I think Kurt Russell. Alright guys, let's start with Sir Nick's skills, starting with his A1, Boreal Blade. Attacks one enemy. Has a 50% chance of placing a freeze debuff for one turn. This debuff cannot be resisted. Damage based on HP. So Sir Nick is an HP champ. He has a ton of HP, and it's nice that his skills, that their damage is based on HP. That means all you gotta do is build up that HP. So it's really easy with Sir Nick and his damage multipliers and his base health to build him really strong and to build him to hit hard. And also notice here that that freeze on his A1 cannot be resisted. So it means two things. One, it doesn't matter what the resistance of his enemy is, he's got a 50% shot to freeze them. And two, because this is Sir Nick's only debuff and it can't be resisted, you don't have to build him with accuracy. So you can just put more HP on him, more and more and more HP, all right? So that's the cool thing about Sir Nick. He has that chance to freeze on his A1 and you don't even need accuracy, okay? And you can increase this further with the mastery to 55%, but really good, hard-hitting A1. On to Sir Nick's A2 Polar Protection. Attacks all enemies. Places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. The value of the shield is equal to 30% of the damage inflicted. Damage based on HP. So, firstly, if the damage here from his A2 is done against a shield on the opposing team, like let's say the whole opposing team has shields up, and you don't actually break the shield, then Cernic will not receive a shield in return. So this only works if the damage is to the health of the target enemies. But if he's just hitting against a shield and it doesn't break through, then he won't receive any shield in return. But here, once again, the damage is based on HP, 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. And if you get lasting gifts that mastery, then you have potentially 100% uptime on your shield, which is a good thing. But it's RNG. It's not something you can count on, like you're going to fight the Scarab King with this because you think you can get 100% uptime on shields. You can't count on it. That mastery, the percentage is too low. But it's nice to have that potential to have 100% uptime on shields with Cernic. Plus, this hits really hard. It's an AoE attack. It hits really, really hard. You know, that's the way Cernic is. He just hits really hard. So this is another great skill of Cernic. On to Cernic's A3, Goodwill. Places an unkillable buff and a 15% continual heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. So this is on a 6-turn cooldown, bookable to 4. Really good skill. Obviously, you keep people from being killed with that unkillable, plus you're healing them. Plus on your A2, you're putting shields up. Plus on your A1, you're freezing people. Plus Cernic always hits hard. So he's the kind of champ that can pretty much do it all. The only thing he can't do is revive. And that's why I got his reindeer. So those Rhine beasts, they can revive people. Okay, so Cernic, man, he does so much for the team. That's why he's good in so many different areas of the game, because his skill set is so diverse. It's so useful in all the different things that he can do. So if you guys didn't know, you can also use Cernic for an unkillable clan boss team. So that is how versatile this guy is. On to Cernic's aura. Increase ally HP in all battles by 33%. Great aura, you'll use it a lot. So guys, how would I rate Cernic? He is a solid A, especially if you're lucky enough to pull him early. He's just gonna smash his way through the campaign, just smash his way through the dungeons, smash his way through Doom Tower, everything. Plus, he's gonna carry your team. He has an unkillable, he has a healing, he has the shields. He is so powerful. I remember I pulled him early, and in the old days of Arena, so this is like bronze and silver, I would just leave him alone by himself in my arena defense. And like 90% of the time, people couldn't kill me. It was crazy. He's so strong. He's so overpowered, especially early game. And he has late game uses as well. As I mentioned, you can use him to build an unkillable team for your clan boss. So that is absolutely awesome. Now, we don't see him as much in later upper tier arena. And you know, we could see a revival of Cernic in the future, who knows? But he is definitely a really useful champion. If you pull him, you have pulled one of the strongest champs in the game. So definitely A for Cernic. On to Venus, guys. One of those champs where you can literally just close your eyes, put her on any team of yours in any place in the game, and she's gonna do great. Alright guys, let's start with Venus's skills and her A1, Pining. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. So this poison chance cannot be increased with books. It can be increased with masteries. But I would say that the chance of poisoning isn't high enough to make her just a top tier poisoner. Now she's a really good poisoner, but she's not like Zavia or Nethril on that level of poisoning. But nevertheless, a 2-hitter, which is really good for places like Fire Knight. Plus, she has that poison, which is just universally good for most all the bosses in this game. On her A1 as well. Plus, it hits pretty strong. So definitely good A1. Now on to Venus's A2, Blind with Infatuation. Attacks all enemies. Has a 75% chance, bookable to 100, of placing a 60% decreased defense and a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. So this is on a 3-turn cooldown. It cannot be changed. It cannot be reduced. But this is a great skill. When you can get defense down and weaken on the same skill in an AoE skill, so it's hitting all enemies, that's really powerful. There's only a select few characters in this game that have defense down and weaken on an AoE skill, and Venus is one of the early champs to have it. So super powerful skill, once again just universally useful everywhere. The idea that she can AoE, defense down and weaken just everybody is so powerful, because you really see those big damage numbers pop up when people have defense down and weaken, and she can do it to everybody. So absolutely great A2. Now on to Venus's A3, Burning Passion. Attacks all enemies. Has a 50% chance, bookable to 75%, of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. So this is on a 5-turn cooldown, bookable to 4. Once again, really good skill. We've seen in the Doom Tower how useful HP burn is. Now, it's not stackable, so you can only have 1 HP burn on 1 character at any one time, but still it's a really good and really strong debuff. So we're seeing that resurgence of HP burn usefulness, especially because of the Doom Tower. And she can do it AoE style. Alright guys, let's talk about Venus's A4, Pure Partner, which is only available when Cupidus, her partner, is on the same team. Removes all buffs from all enemies. Has a 50% chance of granting an extra turn. So think about it, how insane this is. Not only can she bust out a Madame Ceres or a Cythalia in removing buffs, but she can get an extra turn. So right after, she can apply defense down and weaken, or she can HP burn them, or she can poison them, whatever. Okay, so this is such a super duper strong skill, and one of the best partner skills in the game. One of the absolute best. Okay, so really the benefit for the partner skill is Venus. She gets such a big upgrade. Cupidus gets an okay upgrade, but Venus gets the huge upgrade. Now she is a buff stripper with a good chance to get an extra turn. Lastly, Venus's Aura. Increases ally HP in all battles by 33%. So we've seen this a few times in this faction. Very, very good and useful aura. So how would I rate Venus? Well, what do you guys think? Remember I said in the intro, you can literally close your eyes and put her on any team you have anywhere in this game. What do you think that deserves? She's an A. She's great. I wasn't kidding. You level 60 her, you ascend her, you put some good gear on her. All of a sudden, she's a part of every single team that you have. She's really that good. So she is an A tier on her own. So what about with Cupidus, S tier? So all of a sudden, with Cupidus, she becomes a Madame Ceres. It's just crazy. And there are buff strippers out there that only strip maybe 1 or 2 buffs. Okay? She strips them all. Everything. Plus she gets an extra turn. So not only is she stripping all your buffs, but she might put defense down and weaken on the whole team right after. Okay? So she can do it all. She's so plug and play. Put her anywhere. She's that good. And she's tanky too. She is tanky. Okay? On top of everything. So definitely A tier without Cupidus. S tier with Cupidus. Alright guys, let's talk about our last legendary in the Sacred Order. A fairly new champion, but one that also is a couple with another champion, Cardiel. Let's start with Cardiel's A1, Cal the Wicked. Attacks one enemy. Heals all allies by 7.5% of their max HP. Also places a True Fear debuff for 1 turn if the target is a champion from the Demon Spawn, Undead Hordes, or Knights Revenant factions. damage based on attack. So chances are you won't be building him for attack since he's a support champion, but his damage multiplier is actually not bad for his A1. But in any case, the nice thing about it is that heal. So you have 7.5% of everyone's max HP just by using his A1. And that can be increased with books. Now, probably the increase is multiplicative and not additive. So in the end, when you book him out, he won't be healing people for 27.5% of their health on every A1 attack. That sounds like a little bit too much. So it's probably multiplicative, the healing. But in any case, it's a lot, okay? Over 7.5% of everyone's max HP just by using his A1. So there's a lot of utility there. You know, things like continuous heal. They need people to take turns for it to work. He just instantly heals people for 7.5% of their health when he uses his A1. So really good A1. So for that second part of his A1 where he applies True Fear to Demon Spawn, Undead Hordes, or Night Revenant, you should probably just forget about it. Because if you think, well, finally, you know, I can keep Sifi from taking a turn, I'll just use my A1 and True Fear her. Well, the True Fear itself, it doesn't have a 100% chance of proccing, right? It's only 50%. Secondly, this is not irresistible. So if you're facing a Duchess, if you're facing a Sifi in the arena, they'll probably have high resistance. Okay, so they'll probably just resist this True Fear. So it'd be awesome, probably a little bit OP if this was irresistible, but because it is resistible, you probably won't see too much utility out of it. On to Cardiel's A2, Angel Song. Removes all debuffs from all allies, then places a block debuffs buff and a revive on death buff on all allies for 2 turns. The revive on death buffs cannot be removed. So this is on a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 3. So really good skill. Okay, so that team-wide cleanse is great. Plus the block debuff, so you get 2 turns where you can't get debuffs, right? Great. Now that can be removed, but his revive on death cannot. So that sticks with everybody, okay? But I don't think this skill is as OP as people thought. When Cardiel first came out, this skill sounded crazy. But then I think people realized, well, if I keep Cardiel from taking a turn, then, well, he can't cast this. And even if he does, if I can just kill people and they revive, they don't revive with like 100% turn meter or something like that. I can just kill them again. So it's not as crazy as it sounds. It's not as OP as it sounds. Nevertheless, it's a really good skill. Not necessarily for the revive on death or the irremovable part, but for the cleanse and the block debuffs. Those are great buffs. Really good. So on 3-turn cooldown too. So this is a really good skill. On to Cardiel's A3, Heavenly Host. Places a 30% increased crit rate buff and a 30% increased crit damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. Then teams up with all allies to attack a target enemy. Decreases the cooldown of this skill by 1 turn if an enemy is killed from this attack. So this is on a 6-turn cooldown, bookable to 4 turns. And if you kill someone, then that's a 3-turn cooldown, which you will likely kill someone with this skill. So this is a great ally attack skill and arguably one of the best. Not only because he can reduce the cooldowns if this kills somebody, which it probably will, but he also gets the increased crit rate and increased crit damage buff on everybody. So excellent team attack ability, probably the best in the game. Alright guys, let's talk about Cardiel's passive, Fiend Warden. Allies receive 20% less damage from champions from the Demon Spawn, Undead Hordes, or Night Revenant factions. Whenever an ally attacks, has a 15% chance to team up with them and join their attack. This champion will attack with their default skill. Always joins Sisia Flame Tongue's attacks if they are on the same team. Can only join an ally's attack once per turn. Cardiel will not team up on ally attacks when they counterattack or when team up to attack with another champion. So here is something similar to Astralon. So if Cardiel's partner Sissia is on the same team, when she attacks, he will attack with his A1. So very similar to Astralon, but Cardiel has the chance, 15%, to ally attack whenever anybody attacks on the same team. So that is one benefit that he has over Astralon. I like that damage reduction as well from Demon Spawn, Undead Hordes, and Night Revenants factions. So basically those pesky Rhodoses in the arena, you're going to be taking less damage from them. So how would I rate Cardiel? He is an A. He's great. Arguably, he is the best ally attack champion. And as a cleanser on a 3-turn cooldown, he's one of the best. That's the lowest you can get, a 3-turn cooldown for a cleanse. Great. Plus block debuffs, plus his A1 immediately heals. You just use it and you get 7.5% of your health back for everybody. So great A1. Now, as far as his irremovable Revive on Death, I don't think Revive on Death is that good a buff in the first place. So the fact that it can't be removed isn't that interesting to me. Because Revive on Death, if you don't have people to protect you, you don't have support around you, it's not super helpful. Because like I mentioned earlier, you don't Revive on Death with like 100% turn meter. Chances are, if it's team-wide, like all of your team is wiped out and they all have Revive on Death, whoever wiped you out can wipe you out again. Okay, so it's not as strong a buff, I don't think. But his overall kit is great. He is a solid A. And I would say his pairing doesn't really increase his score that much. So with Sissia, I would give him an A+, just because he's joining in on her attacks with his A1. So it's not super great, and her utility isn't great as well for their couple pairing, which I'll talk about when I get to Demon Spawn. So they don't have the best couple pairing abilities or benefits. So with Sissia A+, by himself, Cardiel is an A. Alright guys, that is it for our review of the legendaries in the Sacred Order. So if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you next time.